Shattering Red, Chapter 18. Grease Fire. Vita had climbed to the middle of the room and leaned on the bottom of the presenter's podium, only to discover there was an elevator hidden beneath paint and the dark of the room. She saw a point where doors would retract, then followed them to the middle where they would open. There were also stairs leading to the top for the average person to walk up to their moment of questioning. The line that had existed before the show was gone, and pre-qualified people with questions were lining up in the order they were electronically told to. There was only about a minute left before Talbot's presentation was up. "Luck," she spoke into her earpiece. "Yes," he drew out. "Can you please use the elevator to hold the announcement guy for a bit?" she asked. But he was on silent on the other side. Vita walked to the front of the staircase and watched the glass-like dome pop up and swallow the announcer, taking him up to the podium. "I cut off his mic. He will probably have a bad phobia of elevators after this." Luck chuckled darkly. Vita glanced at the line of people and inhaled, hoping the oxygen would get her heart acting in some semblance of normal after the adrenaline supercharged her. The middle podium was currently out of the lighting, the people in line distracted by their devices. She decided to dash up the stairs. One person glanced her way, but shrugged it off, assuming she was part of the show. The lights flickered when she was halfway up as the video ended for Irene Lark. There was applause, and the spotlight switched to the top of the middle podium, where Vita was now above the whole of their society. "Your mic is live," Luck encouraged in her ear. She felt nervous sweat drip from her forehead and run past her ear. She slipped the pebble she had dreamt of from her pocket and worked it into her right palm. Focus renewed, she glared out over the crowd. "Thank you," she said, her voice booming over the crowd. "People of Afthonia, the next contender is a liar," she declared with a bite. The amphitheater went quiet. Nothing like this had happened before, and the people were not yet sure if it was part of the show or something more. However, Vita's attention was not on the room at large. It was stuck on the podium that housed Talbot, whose expression was stone cold. Luck had silenced the old man's microphone, so when he tried to fire back a response, all the crowd saw was his jaws flapping in the wind, with him visibly irate. She did not notice that Luck kept creating obstacles with nanobots to trip up the guards or impede them on their way to subdue her. "Over the last few weeks, he has tried to kill me and my boss for uncovering a secret I think everyone needs to be made aware of. So here I am." She looked directly into his eyes, the malice on his face speaking volumes to the sprawl. "Here is your Talbot Trent." Everything went dark again, and there was a clicking noise. A little grating noise that Luck added to the beginning of their film to add crunch. Vita's pre-recorded voice boomed across the black stadium. A white flash blinded everyone, followed by an image of Talbot spinning atop for a group of children. Lifelong Politico, with the care of the people behind him. Various images of Talbot working his life through his career were flying by with a curious instrumental accoutrement. A man whose family historically helped hundreds of thousands of families grow towards a healthier tomorrow through improved reproduction practices. The video cut to a picture of Talbot kissing a baby, and a big red slash came over the image, as well as a single loud alarm. "You might want to rethink that." Images and recordings that were very damning started to fly across the screen. Vita watched in awe at the work Luck had managed. Cracking into Talbot's computer had given them all the additional footage Luck had needed to really make the older man look supremely vile. There was stuff she hadn't been aware of that flashed across the screen, and she understood why Luck had asked her to wait to watch it. She wouldn't have showcased just how disturbing he was. It was as if he had managed to capture the old man's whole life in 10 very long and hard-to-watch minutes. To make it worse for the wrongdoer, Luck had popped a screen up in the corner of the video so everyone could watch Talbot's reaction to his own life on display. He visibly stiffened at the sight of old cannon fodder. He sweated profusely and was clearly irate and struggling not to jump into an overreaction. He watched the screen with as much awe as the rest of the crowd, and winced as he watched his younger self cutting out sections of documents in the archives. Then a clip of him moving down a narrow hall when he was much younger, muttering to himself about his stupid fucking father, and why couldn't he have just done the honest thing. The scene then changed to his father in a medical room, with a clone lying on the metal table with all sorts of nodes and diodes attached to their limp body. For all to see, there was a note that ran across the screen over the new man in the video. It labeled the man working on the clone's body as Richard Trent, Talbot's father, not grandfather, as supposed. He was fumbling with medical instruments in what appeared to be a sterile room, a look of defeat on his face. I just cannot get the brainwaves to actually stop. I don't know how to knowingly turn off the consciousness. That means, even though we can bring the clone into this world, paralyzed, and we can mess with their pain receptors, they are still aware, stuck in an immovable body. Isn't that condemning a harmless piece of flesh basically to a life of torture? His associate, labeled Alec Klein, asked in horror while examining the naked body. I cannot move. Richard Trent had injected the man with something, and he collapsed into a lump on the floor. No one must know, he uttered. No one must know, he uttered again, slightly louder this time while peering at the young boy, who must not have been into his teens yet. Except for you, this is your legacy and your burden to bear. Why? The child version of Talbot wailed, tearfully confused. Because opulence of any sort comes with a price. But it also makes you untouchable. You will be one of the privileged few, if you can bear it. The scenes then flashed and weaved through Talbot's worst actions and moral dilemmas, which left the audience cringing. The attention changed to his adult life, where it was revealed he kept what looked like a very young female surrogate in his house for his own pleasures. This man had never known want, and seemed to indulge in everything right or wrong behind closed doors. He thought his private network kept him secure and away from prying eyes. Luck showed him otherwise, as the whole city jeered. That was when Vida began to wonder about the lack of guards. She took her Tomo out and asked Luck, who verbally replied in her ear, "Anyone connected to the Untomo network now cannot move. I put their clothing on lockdown." "What?" she texted back. "That means they won't move. People here actually took the tech too far. Basically, everyone here could get stuck just because they don't wear natural clothing. The guards' clothing has become their own personal prison." She could hear the smile in his response. "Remind me never to piss you off," she texted back, to a delighted giggle in her ear. She looked back at the screen, which now showed the man going through and checking the archives, and looking upset at finding something to do with names. There was a date on the bottom of the camera information, which showed that this was taken in the archive hall 2 weeks prior. There was another short clip of Talbot entering Verithi's office and tipping something into his food, as well as the doctor's mad dash out of the room. The video then showed Talbot interacting with Vida and chasing her out of the surrogacy center, and the man who pushed her away from the moving cart and her awkward bow. Talbot had apparently had one of the red-cloaked people waiting for him outside. There was footage that caught them pushing the cart at her upon Talbot's command. Evidence by backed-up texts executing the order. The old man's nostrils flared as he watched his own mess unfurl. The crowd below were beginning to stand and yell. Vida's pre-recorded self walked across on screen. She bounded on, trying to look as perky as she could. "Hello! My name is Vida Sealis. I am one of Dr. Verithi's assistants. 3 weeks ago, if you had asked me who Talbot Trent was, I would not have been able to pick him out of a crowd. I'm making sure that you are receiving the video today only because that man is a nuisance and terror to our society and others. And one day, I went from my normal job at the surrogacy center to traveling in the wilds because this man made attempts to kill me. I didn't even know what I had done. Without the help of family and friends, I wouldn't be able to deliver this information to you. My father, Faust Delandre, did not make it. Vita looked down as Faust's last moments played. He fell and the scene changed, casting the whole arena into bloody light. He was the first I knew to have fallen to Talbot, but nowhere near the last. The camera gave a lasting impression of the red smear that was all that was left of Cedalus. There were people audibly vomiting. Luck had managed to scrape together the time of the attack and had cross-referenced it with Talbot's logs. There was a recording side by side of his personal bot use and the actual visual from the bots themselves. They circled in on the town and started buzzing about the people, listening in on people's conversations until it caught a tidbit from the children in the fields. They were hard at work, mounding the soil and chattering away innocently in the sun. "You think they'll come back through?" a little brown-haired boy asked Emma, that same girl Vita had spent an afternoon with. She would not have been prepared, nor would Luck have known the importance of the little girl. A tear escaped her eyes before she could catch it, as she realized what was about to happen. She closed her eyes and plugged her ears, and hummed as loud as she could. "I don't know," the little girl shook her head, and worked her hands out of the dirt. She was wiping them off on the little apron she wore to try to keep her clothes a little less dirty. "Would you go back to a home that sent someone to kill you?" she asked the boy. Another of Talbot's round bots appeared on the other side of the kids, recording every last word they had to say. It showed Talbot's reaction from his home computer, where he sat in peace a town away, commanding the robots. His wrinkled cheeks pulled back as he gnashed his teeth in anger. "What do they know?" he muttered to himself, and watched as the kids worked and talked until one of them dropped his name. "But why would Talbot go so far?" the boy asked the girl, who took a moment to consider his question. "Vita kept talking about how good our food was, and then told me about the way they grow their food." She plucked a bean from the pillars of green they were working from. "It was so controlled with no natural and no passion. It makes me wonder where the love was at. Notice how she couldn't have fun?" She ate one of the beans and continued to pick while she spoke. "I can't imagine a place with no passion for food turns out happy people. To ruin so many people over a sentence read, I bet Talbot didn't get enough love." The two orbs fired. The children collapsed. Vita found new tears welling up in her eyes for the loss of the innocents. There were hundreds of more shots of people falling that followed as the orbs captured the tantrum that Talbot was having on the other side of his monitor, clicking arbitrarily as he decimated a town so distant it didn't feel real to him. The old man was now sopping wet. What hair he had left on his head was plastered to it. He was yelling. Luck did not award him back his microphone. So he started to lose it on stage, going beet red and not being heard. The roar of disgust from the crowd was so loud, it was as if vibrations of the tumultuous people pulsed through the skin to the core. The video had ended, and the people were not having him. From her vantage point, Vita saw a wave of angry people in pink rush Talbot's stage. "Hold on, I think I can do something." Luck's voice ticked in her mortified ears. She had never witnessed such chaos erupt. The podium beneath her began to shift. "I added wheels and means to push." She noticed that the announcer was booted off the podium before it started to move. Gently, she glided over to menacingly tower over Talbot's overrun platform. "A little mood lighting," Luck added, as she and Talbot were illuminated across every screen. Talbot stood stiff, finger pointing in absolute rage in her direction, but all sound was drowned out by the tidal wave of angry people working their way to personally lay a hand on the cretin. The crowd was collectively starting to throw people up onto Talbot's raised dais, his security stuck where they stood by their own clothing. Vita again became aware of the pebble in her hand, the little honey and blood-colored stone, urging her to allow it to become more than a rock, but the stone she cast at her personal terrorist. Again, like the previous day, it felt like her sister was there. She looked up and could have sworn she saw the shadow of her sister's face wink in approval, then vanish. A warm feeling took over her stomach and radiated out, filling her whole being. A sense of calm determination followed. It felt as though her sister was there once more, pulling her arm back. A surge of jubilant defiance took over. "For my sister!" Vita shouted, heard by all, and cast the rock at the old man, who, in the moment, had also been tackled to the ground by a group of women in pink. It was such a small thing. She thought at most, if her aim was true, it might hit him in the eye, to her shock and his unknowing dismay, and the crowd's outright delight. It flew right down his gaping gullet. Thank you so much for listening to Shattering Red, Chapter 18. If you've enjoyed the story so far, please take a look at the book. I will include a link below to Amazon. However, it is available at most online major retailers. If you don't want to buy the book, but you would like to donate, I will include a link to my Kofi account. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen. Take care.